Doug, yesterday was the day to get your taxes done. Now, I'm all finished. Did you get yours in on time?
Oh, yeah. I enlisted the help of the accounting firm Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe this year. I'm just now realizing the mistake I made.
Why live easy when you can die hard? Welcome to the Diehards. I'm your host, J.J. Wenner, and I am joined by the rambling rascal himself, Doug Orth. Tonight on the show, we are diving into the 2025 wide receiver class. Please make sure you do all the good things to support the show. Like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Now, Doug, before we dive into your rankings, is there anything the good people should know?
Well, let's repeat most of what we said the last 2 weeks here. Here are some of the ground rules. At each position, I score each prospect using a film grade and a prospect grade. Because this is a fantasy show, we will go according to how I think they should be selected in rookie drafts as of right now. Landing spots will probably alter my thinking a bit, but that's a different discussion for another day.
Good.
I have used my scoring system over the last 4 drafts. This class contains the 4th and 7th ranked receivers in terms of prospect grade over that time. What is prospect grade, you ask? At receiver, a player needs to be a realistic threat for 70 catches and 1,000 receiving yards at some point early in their career to be a candidate for a perfect grade of 50. Positional scarcity at the pro level is also part of the equation, so that's going to push things down a little bit because there are so many good receivers right now. Tonight, we'll discuss 13 receivers. For each one, we'll discuss some basic profile information before summarizing what they bring or don't bring to the NFL. I will wrap up with a high-end and low-end comp, followed by best team fits and a prospect grade. And I got to get my shameless plug in here real quick. You can find my complete write-ups. I just sent in one of the guys we'll talk about right off the top. I just sent him in earlier today. Hopefully that's either up right now or will be tomorrow. And you can find my complete write-ups on all the players we were discussing this month on FF Today. Got it? Good. JJ.
All right, sir. Well, might as well kick off. Who's your number one?
And this is the guy I submitted. Tre McMillan. Arizona's very own Tre McMillan, the Polynesian guy, the Polynesian Hawaiian guy who has dominated college football the last couple of years. 6'4", 219, 10-inch hands, and he's going to be 22 at the start of the season. He didn't do any of the combine stuff, but he did run between a 4.48 and a 4.53 reportedly at his pro day. If we go with the 4.48, that's a 61st percentile if it had happened at the combine. JJ, in the 4 years I have given film grades to players, only three receivers had previously top 70. The first 3 of them were selected inside the top 10 of last year's draft. There's one receiver in this draft class that belongs with that group in my mind, and it's McMillan. His 2023 film may be the best I've seen in the 10-plus years I have been watching receiver prospects. His 2024 film was almost as good. Perhaps the most amazing metric of this draft season is that PFF charted him as open against zone on 94.3% of his targets. As we know, the NFL plays zone now over 70% of the time. Obviously, that doesn't quite translate like that, but if he's a zone beater, that much of a zone beater in college, he's probably going to be a pretty good zone beater in the pros. It should not take long for him to be considered one of the best contested catch receivers in the game. Huge frame. We talked about 6'4", long arms, and he's got vice grip for hands. Of course, when you have 10-inch hands, you better have vice grip hands, right? Those things figure to make him a go-to option across the middle for a decade or more. Few, if any, college receivers have been better at working the sideline as well. He's even exceptional with the ball in his hands. He's posted almost 1,000 yards after the catch over the last 2 seasons combined. He even offers some trick play utility, having completed 4 or 5 passes for 43 yards and a touchdown on receiver throwbacks over the course of his college career. The perfect receiver prospect would ideally have a little bit more burst. Again, we're talking 6'4", 219, 220. That's not the easiest thing for that guy that big to have burst. So we'd like to see a little bit more of that from him, but we understand why it probably won't happen. And little bit more burst and thus consistently create more separation downfield. But those are really minor knocks at a position where it's difficult to have above average or better traits across the board. With that said, it almost seems at times as McMillan is slowing up on some plays because he knows he has such a size and athletic advantage over most cornerbacks. It also may not be fair to say he did not create much separation especially against man coverage, which PFF has as well, is like a 53% separation against man. But it may not be fair to say he didn't create much separation because he was underthrown a lot. And so that's part of the reason why you saw so many ball skills is because he was underthrown so often. In my mind, McMillan belongs in the same conversation as Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas as a player who could immediately be the alpha receiver for the team that drafts him. Barring a horrible landing spot in which the team already has a target monster in place, T-Mac, as he is affectionately referred to, should contribute immediately and be an annual threat for at least 80 to 90 catches early in his career. My high-end comp for him, I went with Larry Fitzgerald. Low-end comp for him, Cortland Sutton. And I'll go through the team fits real quickly, at least in the order I think they should go. Raiders, Panthers, Patriots, Jets, Jaguars, Chargers, and Cowboys. And I've been talking about how much of a prospect I think he is. 43 out of 50, and that's fourth out of the 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
So when you talk about team fits, what do you mean?
So we talked about I talked about him being an X receiver, right?
Yep.
Okay, so in this case, I'm thinking, okay, who has needs at X receiver? Basically, the guy that's usually lining up by himself and needs to beat press coverage, right? Typically, passing games are centered around what the X can do. So to answer your question here, I'm looking for teams that have needs at X receiver or are very much a high-end number 2 receiver. That's kind of what I'm looking for here, to be as simple as I can about it.
Now, I know Tet's size is pretty impressive, as is his ability to create after the catch. My only question is there any worry about his ability to get off of press coverage?
Yeah, that's a fair question, and I would say I wouldn't call it a concern because I think once he deals with it more and then is taught to because there's always an adjustment. There's what you bring, then there's the adjustment, then there's the adjustment to the adjustment. I don't think he's soft by any stretch of imagination. I think he'll learn how to use his size off press, and there's just, when you get right down to it, there's just not too many corners that can handle a receiver that big. And even so, he plays the ball in the air so well that he could end up being a back shoulder fade kind of guy too. But I think he's so much more than that.
All right, Doug, who is your number 2 wide receiver?
Yeah, I expect some pushback on this one, and I'm going to say this even if he is just a full-time receiver, and that's Colorado's Travis Hunter. 6 foot, 188 pounds, 9 1/8 inch hands, and he's going to be 22 at the start of the season. He didn't do anything at the combine, or at least didn't do any of the 40. He didn't test out at the combine basically, and I don't have any numbers for him at his pro day. I don't think he even did any of that. He's one of those guys that tape can speak for itself. I mean, we're talking about a high end athlete. In case you didn't already know. Any discussion about Hunter almost has to begin with what position he will play the most in the NFL. The general consensus is that he will be a full-time cornerback and part-time receiver, but he's determined to prove that he can be the first modern era player who can play both ways full-time. It would honestly be a waste of his skills if he's not utilized as a receiver on at least half his next team's offensive snaps, and it should come as no surprise if he simply proves to be too good to be anything less than a team's number 2 receiver as a rookie. And what do I mean by that? Let's say he goes to the Giants. Okay, he'll probably be the number 2 to Malik Neighbors, but I'm talking extreme circumstances here. He goes to most teams, he's going to be their best receiver too. It should go without saying he is the most electric athlete in this draft. His upside as a receiver is astronomical, in part because he is such a good athlete, and in part because he got by so often on his athletic ability in college. Now, Colorado's coaching staff did little to prepare him for the pro game as a receiver, relying heavily on spread formations to create space. What's more is that it was extremely rare when Shedeur Sanders took a 3 or 5 step drop and hit Hunter on a slant or an out route. He had 95 catches last year, JJ, as I recall. Now listen to this: 13 combined targets on the routes I just mentioned, slants and outs. Right? It was a lot of pitches and a lot of screens, and that's going to be a common theme throughout. But my thinking here, what I just said about hitting on a slant or an out route, this kind of thing should have been a given considering his run after catch ability. Now, a common belief in scouting is to focus on what a player can do and not on what a player cannot or was not asked to do. So let's do that here. Hunter is exceptional at tracking the ball and winning contested catch situations. He's right up there with Ted. I think McMillan's probably the best I've seen him at, and Hunter's not too far behind. Hunter is arguably as dynamic as any receiver prospect in the recent memory after the catch. His conditioning is extraordinary, regularly playing over 100 snaps a game. There was one time a season he was averaging 111 snaps. I don't know if that's where he finished, but he was doing that for well into the season. Most of the negatives with Hunter are more things that he was not asked to do. His football IQ is next level, so I don't question that he will be able to sharpen his route running, which will need to happen. He was always the best athlete on the field in college. He won't have the luxury of dancing around on his routes in the open field as often as the pros as he did in college. I also question Hunter's ability to add strength without losing his twitchiness and staying healthy all season. If not because, and I mean the last part, his durability, if not because he's played both sides of the ball, then because he puts his body in such peril on contested catches. What do I mean by that? First guy I go to when I think of guys that get hurt because of the way they catch the ball, Mike Williams, right? Travis Hunter had a lot of Mike Williams falls. I question his ability to hold up because of that. Something I also saw, I don't know if it means much. He also drew an abnormal amount of pass interference penalties in college, but he also got away with his fair share of pushing off on downfield throws too. As much as I would like him to prove his doubters wrong and play both ways, I'm not sure his body can handle it game after game and year after year. He has superstar potential on either side of the ball if that one side is his focus, but the overall rawness in his game makes him the second best receiver in this draft to me. My high-end comp for him, and you'll see this if you watch any bit of him, Odell Beckham Jr. Okay. And prime Odell Beckham. Low-end Chris Olave. My team fits for him in order: the Giants, the Patriots, the Jaguars, the Raiders, and the Browns. And I have him just a hair behind Ted McMillan in terms of prospect grade, 42.5, and that's tied for 5th out of 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
You know, there's no doubt that Travis Hunter is a one-of-one player. I mean, there's never been anybody like him. He recently said that he's either going to play both ways or he's not playing. Now, I have long asserted that I don't quite understand how his agent's going to allow him to get paid one salary and play two positions. He's never going to get paid. Right? You're not going to get paid this as a wide receiver and a cornerback.
This is, I hate to switch sports on you. This is not a Shohei Ohtani situation. He's not going to get paid $50 million because he's a top 5 corner and a top 5 receiver. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it. I get him wanting to do it. I just question, like you say, what is the long-term effects of trying to play 100 snaps a game in the NFL or 80 snaps in the NFL? That's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Do you think teams are going to buy into it?
They're according to him, they are. They're telling him they are. I think he can do it from a conditioning perspective. I don't think his body can handle it. Like I said, if I don't know, I mean, let's think about. I know this is a different position, but let's think like a running back and a linebacker. Can you imagine how beat up you would be after 1 week, much less 17, 18 weeks. So I think he's going to try. I think he'll be able to hold up for a little while, but I don't think if a team's telling themselves that we're going to get 4 years or 5 years because he's going to go in the first round, so he'll get that team option too. If they're telling themselves that they can get 5 years of top-end receiver and quarterback play, I don't think his body is going to be so old in terms of miles stepped that, I mean, he might be 27 at the end of his rookie contract, but he's going to feel like he's 29 or 30. So,
yeah, and of course, as a disclaimer, I want to see Travis Hunter go out there, dominate on both sides of the ball. All power to him. I mean, that is amazing. That's a throwback to an era of football when none of us were alive for. But I just worry about his overall health and how long he'll be able to do that for.
I will say, if anybody can do it, he's got the conditioning to do it. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, and I think you hope you're wrong about his body ability to hold up.
Absolutely. So, Doug, who is your number 3 wide receiver?
I'm torn on this one because I think this is, we talk about like a safe drive on the green, but or safe drive down the fairway, but not, it doesn't get to the green. That's what Emeka Egbuka feels like. I think there's no question in my mind he'll be a good pro. I wonder what the upside is. Anyway, Ohio State, 6'1", 202, 9 5/8 inch hands, and he's going to be 22 at the start of the season. I don't have any combine numbers for him, but he ran a 4.48 at his pro day. That's 61st percentile if it had happened at the combine, and a 38-inch vertical, surprisingly, and that would have been 78th percentile if it had happened at the combine. Now, most successful teams have a receiver like Egbuka, a crafty guy who is comfortable being a sidekick and more than happy to work the middle of the field and move the chains. Many college receivers win because they are usually a better athlete than the players lining across from them. Egbuka wins largely because he has been a pro receiver playing in college for most of his 4 years with the Buckeyes. He has some of the best footwork from a receiver in this draft class and catches just about everything in his direction. His football intelligence also shines through with how quickly he identifies the void in zone coverages. While he's never had a chance to be the alpha in college, playing behind the likes of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jeremiah Smith, and it goes back a little, I think, to like Olave and some of those other guys. And Jeremiah Smith, in case you guys don't know, likely top 10, if not top 5 pick in 2027. Most people in dynasty leagues are already preparing for that guy. So,
or in Devy leagues,
or Devy, there you go. But. So, like I said, he never had a chance to be an alpha, but it speaks volumes that he is the school's all-time leading receiver in terms of receptions and receiving yards. Speaks to his longevity there, but it also speaks to the fact that he was consistently productive all 4 years. Remember, this is a program that has served as the home for the likes of Harrison, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Terry McLaurin, and Jackson Smith-Njigba in just the last decade. For all that Egbuka does well, he is a limited athlete. Now, Ohio State inexplicably used him in a lot of screens and shallow crossers, which, if you're a limited athlete, it doesn't make a ton of sense. It did result in the occasional big play, but mostly exposed his run after catch ability, which was a career low 5.9 in 2024. He does not get out of his breaks very quickly either, which tells me he might end up being more of a power slot that does not strike fear into defenses with his size. So now he's going to be a power slot trying to beat guys with footwork. It can happen, but it limits his upside. Perhaps the biggest concern of value raters right now is how often the Buckeyes did put him in the slot. Among receivers with at least 100 targets last season, Egbuka ranked 9th in slot rate at 81.1%. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing for a college wideout to live in the slot, especially at a school known for churning out receivers like Ohio State. But it might be a bit of a red flag for NFL teams since he wasn't creating a ton of separation with a lot of free releases inside either. He's also not that fast. I said 4.48, but he's a bigger guy. So it tells me he might end up being in the pros what he was in college, a chain-moving slot receiver who makes his living over the middle and 15 yards or closer to the line of scrimmage. That's a job description that should keep him in the league for a while, but he's extremely unlikely to be the next Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I've heard him comp to a fair amount, I guess probably because they followed each other in slot at Ohio State, right? But Smith and Jigba was a lot better after the catch than Egbuka, so I'm not going to go there with the comp. My high-end comp for him was prime Robert Woods, and my low-end comp for him is Tyler Boyd. My team fits for him: Bengals, Vikings, Commanders, Cardinals, and Eagles. And I gave him a straight 40 on prospect grade, and that's tied for 20th out of 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
So 22 years old. I feel like I've been hearing about him forever. Yet he never has risen to the top of any analyst ranks. So is it more of a case of like name recognition fatigue? We've heard about him for so long that he's sort of dropping in everybody's eyes? Or are there some serious holes in his game?
At receiver, you don't necessarily need to be a great athlete at receiver, but I think I pride myself, or one of the many things I pride myself on are being, I get into the process late enough that I don't feel the fatigue that it seems like other people that start this in their process in January or earlier. I know it's not a point. I know it's not fatigue on my end because I get to these guys starting in March. So by the time most people have seen their guys film 2 or 3 times, I'm getting through it the first and maybe the second time. I just think he does a lot of things well, and I'm not sure, other than running routes very well, I'm not sure that he excels at anything. And so if it was one of those things where you looked at him, it was jaw-dropping quickness or just how quickly he gets in and out of his breaks, then absolutely. But I don't think it's prospect fatigue. I just think he's limited to a degree.
All right. Well, once again, great analysis. Thank you, Doug. Don't forget to make sure you're following the Diehards on X at FF Diehards. Follow Full-Time Fantasy at Full-Time Fantasy on X as well. Doug, let's get to number 4.
All right, we're starting to get into a little bit of the iffy neighborhood here. Texas' Matthew Golden is my number 4 guy. He obviously blew it up at the combine, but we'll get to that in a second. 5'11", 191, 9.5-inch hands, 22 at the start of this upcoming season. His only combine number that he bothered to the only thing that he bothered to perform in was the 40-yard dash. And of course, he set the combine on fire with 4.29. That's 97% percentile. Now, I've heard some debate, and I think it's legit that he didn't actually run a 4.29, but we can debate that down the road. That's what the numbers say right now, so we'll stick with it. JJ, over the first 10 games of his final college season, Golden averaged 2.9 catches for 41.7 yards. Over his last 6 outings, those numbers jumped to 4.8 catches and 95 yards. So what happened?
He caught more passes for more yards. And that is the kind of
that's the kind of analysis you could expect of the diehards.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, to answer to that question. Some of it, I think, was a product of teammate Isaiah Vaughn injuring his ankle around midseason and then suffering a high ankle sprain right before the Longhorns' extended playoff journey. Some of it was probably realization that Golden was probably just a better fit for quarterback Quinn Ewers than Vaughn was too. Now, much like former Texas receiver Xavier Worley last season, Golden is more than just a sprinter. While it would be a bit much to say he's a great route runner, he displays more nuance than most college speedsters. He has a few release packages in his bag, tempos his routes well, and is lethal when he focuses on selling a double move. He had the best double move that maybe of the season that I've watched so far was the one he had against Arizona State in the college playoff that preserved They were down, I think, 6 in either overtime. I think it was overtime, and then he ran a double route on a 4th and, I don't know, 4th and 15, 4th. It was a long 4th down conversion anyway, he saved the game, got him into the next overtime, which they eventually won. Anyhow, Golden's also a very good kick returner. While there is also some question regarding his 49 speed, which we spoke about, it does not take away from the fact that he stacks defenders well and tracks the deep ball well. Now, the primary concern with Golden is probably the same as it was for former Longhorn AD or AD Mitchell last year. Both players have no problem creating separation and are incredible athletes, but they are also remarkably similar in what might keep them from becoming great. Drop issues. Now, Golden had a 9.4% career drop rate. I think that came down to 6.9 this past year, but still 9.4, too high. Disappointing run after catch ability. That was a 5.2. He had 5.2 yak in 2024 and 5.6 for his career, and then occasional passivity. He's not quite in AD Mitchell's class athletically, but he's probably slightly ahead in terms of development as a receiver. In my mind, he exhibits enough the qualities of good NFL receivers to make me believe he can be a capable number 2. He should be considered a dynamic field stretcher right away, kind of in the De'Ami Brown 2024, circa 2024 mode. But there's also almost no chance in my mind that he becomes an alpha. My high-end comp for him, Santonio Holmes. My low-end comp for him, De'Ami Brown. In order for the team fits, I went with the Chargers, Cowboys, Texans, Raiders, Titans, Jets, and Seahawks. And my prospect grade for him was also a 40, again, tied for 20th out of 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
So, Doug, generally players who run a sub 4.3 40, they get pigeonholed as deep threats. Now, coming into the combine, that's not what he was looked as.
Correct.
Do you think coaches are going to allow him the flexibility, or are they going to test to see if that number was legit?
Oh, I think they'll test to see if it was legit, but one of the rumored spots for him is the Cowboys. Okay. Now, if he gets on the same team as CeeDee Lamb, he's going to stretch the field, regardless of whether he wants to or not. That's going to be his rule. So here again, we're talking about landing spot. It's as much as we assume quality coaching in the NFL. It's amazing how often these guys get pigeonholed, and so. One of the reasons why I'm this far down on him is because I think that's a realistic possibility.
All right. Well, let's hope it doesn't happen to him. If you want good coaching, don't come to my team. Actually, that's not true. I'm sorry, Aaron Glenn. You're new. I'm going to give you a shot. All right. Who do you have for us at number 5?
This is going to be a surprise. I've seen him. I think I don't check out many other people's rankings, but I've seen him as high as 4th. I have him 5th, Jack Bech out of TCU.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
6'1", 214, 9-inch hands, and he's going to be 23 at the start of the season. Don't believe he ran the 40 at the combine. He did everything else, apparently, though. 34.5-inch vertical. Broad jump was 10.5. That's in the 74th percentile. And then 4.21 on the shuttle, 6.84 on the 3-cone, which is for a 214-pound receiver is not bad. Anyhow, as one might expect from a guy that's a receiver that's 6'1", 214, he's put together well physically, very well physically. This makes him hard to knock off his route, and it makes him a beast after the catch, despite what his run after catch metrics from this year might say. He is the rare tone setter at receiver. He loves to take to the fight to the defense after the catch and as a blocker. While he's unlikely to be much of a down-the-field threat in the pros, he is very good at tracking the ball and using his body in contested catch situations. These numbers you'll like, JJ. He recorded a 1.6% drop rate in 2024 and 2.9% drop rate for his career. So if it's coming his way and it's in his vicinity, he's catching it. For as much as I make him sound to be like a bit of a brute, he is surprisingly smooth and twitchy for a bigger receiver. Between his good footwork and willingness to be physical, he should be able to win consistently as a short and intermediate receiver in the NFL. Now, going back to his ability to stretch the field, it isn't so much that he can't do it as that NFL teams will probably have 2 or 3 players on the roster who should be doing it instead. While he was generally able to evade press coverage when he faced it in college, he will probably need to vary up his releases more often, power through it in the pros, because his relative lack of speed will almost certainly invite the press coverage despite how physical he is. His play style also lends itself to getting hurt, which happened in each of the final 3 years of his college career. One other major concern with him is how few games he actually took over, although one could easily use the argument that 2024 was his sophomore season, given how much time he lost due to injury in 22 and 23. The expectation for him should be as a day one starting slot for an offense that wants to lean into how aggressive and how physical he is. He should eventually become a very capable Z receiver, ideally for a running team that will value his ability to pick up yards after the catch and block. You hear a number of comps to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp for him, and you see that in his game. I'm going Anquan Boldin, though. This guy loves to set the tone. For my low-end comp, I went late career Hines Ward.
Okay.
And my best team fits here, and partly because these are teams that are going to value a guy like Bech that can block and be as physical as he is. The Chargers, the Texans, the Jets, the Rams, and the Cowboys. My prospect grade for him was 39.5, and that's tied for 26 out of the 47th graded receivers over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Sean. I loved Anquan Boldin, Hines Ward, right? Jack Bech seems to be destined to become his quarterback's best friend, right? He's a good, quick separator. He works back to the ball on scrambles. But can he be more than just that? Can he be, and I don't mean to go with like a tight end comp, but like a Dallas Clark?
You're right.
Like, can he do that? Is
okay.
That in his repertoire?
And it's great that you mentioned that, because he was recruited by LSU to become a tight end. And that's kind of, he wasn't a tight end per se during his first year, but he was actually a slot receiver. And I need to throw this in. I wasn't going to include this, but he managed to lead. This is an LSU team that had Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Keyshawn Butte, and Trey Palmer at receiver. He led that group in receptions at his first year. So this isn't I think he can, or this guy's already kind of proven it before TCU. But you said Dallas Clark. Could he be used like? I think he could be used like Dallas Clark, but Dallas Clark was essentially a receiver in a tight end's body too. We're talking 6'1", 214 here. I don't think he's ever going to put on 20 pounds and be one of those small move tight ends. I don't think that's what he's going to become. But the thing is about him too is his footwork and his quickness is good enough that he can probably survive as a Z receiver. Now, if you had asked me this 2 or 3 years ago before Puka Nacua came out, I'd say no, he's going to be this. But we've seen from Puka Nacua that what Jack Bech has it's possible just to see at the next level. Now he's going to need to find the right team, obviously, but yes.
Hopefully the LA Rams. Be
yes.
a good fit. They know how to use him.
Yes.
All right, sir. Who do you have for number 6?
Yep. These this range here, 5 through about 10, even changed just today. I'm still very fluid with this, but I'm going with Iowa State's Jayden Higgins here. I eventually got sold. I convinced myself of the size and the drop rate, low drop rate, and so on and so forth. We'll get into that in a bit. 6'4", 214, 9 1/8" hands, and he's going to be 22 at the start of the season. His combine number is 4.47. That was the 60th percentile for 40-yard dash. 39-inch vertical, 85th percentile. Remember, 6'4" receiver, 39-inch vertical. That's a wow. And his broad jump 10.8, and that was 85th percentile for all receivers. Now, Higgins was charged with a drop against UCF, and again in the next game was against Texas Tech. And JJ, that was it. That was all the drops. Guy was targeted 130 times during the course of the season, and he dropped 2 balls in back-to-back game, or dropped the ball in back-to-back games, and that was it. Has to be a great feeling for a quarterback to know he's got a 6'4" receiver with a 39-inch vertical and great hands available to him over the middle of the field. And that's, I think, in a nutshell, what he is. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for that. However, he is more than just a big target and possession receiver. It is uncommon for him to tip off his routes with how he gears down because he is the rare big body receiver who doesn't need to gear down very often. He even has a diverse route tree. And JJ, my God, if I've learned anything from this class, it's how often the hitch route gets run and no other routes gets run. Hitch and screens. Okay. Higgins, like I said, he has a diverse route tree. He was targeted at least 17 times on 4 different types of routes and posted a catch rate of at least 76% on 3 of them. Higgins is quite adept at fighting the void and zone coverage as well. He's also one of the best in the class in terms of tracking the ball down the field, although the go route was easily his least successful route last season. And that was the one route that he didn't get 76% on, that he was targeted at least 17 times. Okay, now on the downside, a little bit on the downside. Despite playing every receiver position in college, he may lack the physicality to become a full-time X, and the speed to stretch the field as a full-time Z. His 4.47 40 time is good for a receiver his size, but he rarely ever flashed that. Now, to that end, his biggest play in 2024 on 87 catches was 39 yards. It probably means his upside as a vertical receiver in the pros will be limited to back shoulder fades and contested catches. Especially given the variety of routes he ran, his run after catch ability was also disappointing. That was 3.8. He had a 3.8 yak in 2024 and 4.5 over his college career. Combined with his somewhat lanky frame, the odds are relatively long that he can live on the perimeter as an X receiver trying to beat press coverage. With that said, size and good hands plays well in almost any offense. Higgins should be an immediate contributor as a slot weapon and a boon to any team's red zone offense. He may not be quite as physical or productive as Allen Robinson was in his heyday, but Higgins should enjoy a long career as a strong number 2 receiver once he gets stronger. Unsurprisingly, my high-end comp for him was Allen Robinson, and my low-end comp for him was Devon Bailey. My best team fits for him, in order, the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Titans, Commanders, and Giants. And he also gets a 39.5 prospect grade, again, tied for 26 out of 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
So, Doug, Matt Waldman suggested in the RSP that Higgins could be a mix of Mike Williams and T. Higgins, just slightly of like a Temu version, maybe Temu's a little too mean, like an Amazon version of T. Higgins and Mike Williams. But there are some who talked a lot about how inconsistent he was. For being that big, for being that dominant, why wasn't there more? Do you have any of those concerns?
Yeah, somebody with his metrics and somebody with his size, I would, if you told me nothing else and I was just judging it based on that, he would be top 3. He'd be up there close to 10. But he doesn't play like 10. I don't think he's that explosive, even though his numbers say his combine numbers say he is. I think what I said about him running a 4.449 40, I didn't see that on tape either. I think if he played to that speed more often, then he'd easily be top 5 in this class for me. Yeah, well, I mean, he was 6, so I mean, but he would moved up. He would moved up over a couple. Probably, I would put him over Egbuka, for example. So, yeah, so top 3 then.
Well, it definitely seems you have a tier break after after 3. That's your tier break.
We go McMillan and Hunter, big tier break. Then we got Egbuka. We got a big Egbuka, Golden. And I have those 2 guys slightly ahead of Bech and Higgins, and the next guy we'll talk about. But okay. This is one I feel good about Egbuka and Golden being in their own tier, I guess you could say, and then we have some more question marks. But guys that with good NFL coaching will be good receivers. So I feel that way about Bech, Higgins, and at least the next two guys we'll talk about.
All right. Well, diehards, Dynasty Leagues are, without a doubt, the fastest growing segment in all of fantasy sports. And the Dynasty Football World Championships, now in their 13th season, are underway. Adopt an orphan to take part in upcoming rookie drafts, which start 1 week after the NFL draft, or jump in a new startup and draft your own team from the beginning. Either way, you'll be well on your way to becoming the next Dynasty King. Drafts start at just $75 with $150, $299, and higher options available. Head to dynastyking.com and look for the Dynasty Football World Championships. All right, Doug, number 7, much lower than most people. Who do you have?
Missouri's Luther Burden. He goes 6 foot 206, 8.5-inch hands, but he's going to be 21 at the start of the NFL season, which makes him unique in that regard. His 40 was a 4.41, which would have been 81st percentile. And then now we'll get to why he's down this low. Now, his production and profile raised the age-old question. Was he limited to a handful of routes because the coaches knew he wasn't very good at the others? Or did they scheme him touches because Missouri believed in him so much as a space player? His 2023 film suggests the latter, that he was just that good of a space player. The 2024 film suggested the former, which says that he wasn't very good at the other routes. But in my opinion, Burden may be the closest thing to Percy Harvin that has entered the draft in years, which can be considered a good and bad thing. When healthy, and that was always the question with Harvin, when healthy, Harvin was a dynamic player in space that defense had a game plan for, even if they knew he wasn't going to be the primary option in the passing game, because he could score from anywhere as a runner or receiver. To that end, he handled 34 carries for 234 yards and 4 touchdowns during his 3-year college career. He forced a missed tackle on 32 of 66 catches last year. He also returned punts as well, and well. He returned punts as well, and he did it very well.
It's a lot of wells.
I didn't want to say good. Good gets overused. Unlike Harvin, Burden's 2023 film showed that he could be more than just a manufactured touch guy. He revealed a receiver with superb ball tracking and contested catch ability downfield. All of that just seemingly disappeared in 2024. This is a great metric. If you ever want to win a debate, Luther Burden debate with somebody, tell them these nuggets coming up here. That's right. Jot it down. Only 333 of his 1,888 receiving yards in 23 and 24 occurred when he was lined up out wide. So that tells you how much in the slot he was, right? He also had just 55 catches when targeted 5 yards or more beyond the line of scrimmage over that same span. And then most of his production came on 2 routes. They ran a lot of slot fades with him and screens. So does all that mean he's a slot-only player? No, not necessarily, but it means he's more of a projection as a perimeter receiver than you want. And again, that's why he's down here. All these guys in some way, shape, or form are projections, but you don't want to have to there's some certain things you're comfortable in projecting, but you don't want to have to project 3 or 4 different things. And it feels like with him and some of these other guys we'll talk about, that's what you're doing. Now on the upside, he has the quickness and strength to get open at will and make defenders look silly after the catch as a quote-unquote normal receiver. As we have learned over the years with running backs and catching the ball, just because a running back did not have a lot of catches in college doesn't mean he's unable to do it. And I use that with Burden here. Just because he wasn't asked to run a full route tree doesn't mean he can't. It just means that we're projecting it. Similarly, all we can say with certainty about Burden's ability to do something more than be a primary slot is that he didn't get a chance to show it very often relative to most receivers. It also seemed like he was less willing to go over the middle in 2024. Was he frustrated? Was he bored with his role? Was he ready to move on to the NFL by around midseason? That's gotten floated around that he was frustrated, bored, and And who knows, maybe he was ready to go on to the NFL by midseason. To be clear, ability is not an issue for him. It is the lack of experience, the lack of evidence of him being something more than a movable chess piece. As such, the expectation for him early in his pro career should be as a primary slot who doubles as a punt returner. Eventually, he should become a very capable Z receiver, assuming he disproves the concerns about winning as an outside receiver. And I think he will do that. My high-end comp for him, I already said, was Percy Harvin. My low-end comp for him, Wan'Dale Robinson. And my best team fits for him in order: the Steelers, the Saints, the Jaguars, the Titans, the Jets, and the Eagles. And he gets stuck with the 39.5 prospect grade as well. That was tied for 26 out of 47th grade receivers the last 4 years.
Yeah. I don't put him on the Jets, please.
No Jets.
No, we already have a guy who needs manufactured touches. They drafted Corley last year, who turned out really well for us. You say maybe he was frustrated and bored. Those are two adjectives I never want to hear for a draft prospect. And in reading up on Burden, analysts were all over the map. Like Matt Waldman had him ranked the highest. He's all gas. Zach Reed, the tacit assassin, our friend, like he had no interest in Luther Burden. So he was the biggest example of the prospects we're talking about tonight, where I had to go back and reread whatever, because there were so many contradictions of what different people saw. But it's funny because I said, is he another Wan'Dale or can he be more? And that's your low end comp. I don't know, man. I don't know if he can be more than a Wan'Dale.
I think he's closer to. I gave it the comps of Harvin and Robinson. I think he's closer to Harvin than Robinson. But I mean, are we talking 51-49 or are we talking 60-40? I don't know there. I know that he's done a better job of staying healthy than Harvin has or did or probably ever did. But no, I think he's another guy that's going to end up getting pigeonholed. He's going to be the manufactured touch guy. I said that I think he has potential for more than that, but I think that's what he's going to get pigeonholed as. As you know from your if you have Wan'Dale Robinson on your dynasty league teams, he's the guy that is. Man, I got a really good fifth receiver. I got a really good sixth receiver. Yeah, so moving on.
Catches, 50 yards. Yay!
Yes.
PPR, good for us. All right, sir. Let's keep it moving. Who do you have at number 8?
All right, let's see if I got my phonics. Let's see if I'm hooked on phonics here.
If you can't even pronounce phonetical, you are not going to be able to say his name.
Elic Ayomanor. How'd I do? I nailed it, baby. I nailed it.
That's pretty good.
Elic Ayomanor. He's out of Stanford for those that aren't familiar. You better get familiar with, actually, if you want to get familiar with him, watch what he did against Colorado a couple years ago. We'll get to that in a second. 6'2", 206, 10-inch hands, and he's going to be 22 at the start of the NFL season. Pretty good athlete for somebody that most of us aren't familiar with here. 4.4, 4.44 in the 40-yard dash, 74th percentile. He had a 38.5-inch vertical, 82nd percentile. Again, remember, this is a big, muscular guy. And he had a 10.7 in the broad, and that was 83rd percentile. I'm going to educate you a little bit, JJ. There's a phrase most NFL scouts know: grade the flashes. Grade the flashes. If he flashes, grade those. Don't grade so much on the humdrum of the grade the flashes. Despite being saddled with average at best quarterback play in his 2 seasons at Stanford, Ayomanor flashed plenty. The most memorable flash, and this was an extended flash, was the 13 catches for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns line that he hung against Colorado as a redshirt freshman. Some people will say, yeah, he burnt Travis Hunter, and that some of it did come against Travis Hunter, but not nearly all of it. Either way, and Travis Hunter, I think it was just coming off like a 3-game absence or something like that. So context is needed with that line, but either way, 13, 294, and 3 in any game means you were dominating it. In a world where many receivers are divas who don't like to get their hands dirty, Ayomanor is just the opposite. It is not hard to imagine him serving as a team captain and emotional leader early in his NFL career because it's obvious it just means that much to him. He's as physical as any receiver in this draft class, which shows up in a big way as a blocker. His highlight reel is full of some of the college football's most jaw-dropping catches as well. Most encouragingly, does not feel if he has come remotely close to touching his ceiling yet. And why do I say that? Because he played 2 years of college football. He sat out as freshman in 2022 due to injury and redshirted. So he just basically had 23 and 24. And he didn't have the luxury of playing with a high-level quarterback at Stanford. There is a chance Ayomanor enters the draft with the same issue that dogged Brian Thomas at this time last year. He looks great, but how much can his next team buy into the player whose route tree was so limited? Much like Thomas, and again, I'm going to bring this up for context. They're not the same player. Let's be clear. He's not Brian Thomas, but I think there is some similarities here. Much like Thomas, and Thomas had a 5.3 yards after the catch at LSU. Ayomanor's yak likely suffered because of the route he was targeted on by far the most, and he was targeted 35 times on a hitch route. I don't know that I see. I looked. I didn't look through all 13 of these receivers, but I don't remember any number being higher than 35 hitch routes or 35 hitch targets. If you didn't know, the hitch is not a yak friendly route, so it doesn't matter if you have it doesn't matter if you have the best yak guy of all time. If you put him on a hitch route, you're limiting his ability to produce yak. So I think the run after catch will quickly become a strength for him. But as I said, the Cardinal did him no favors without the routes they asked him to run or their lack of slot usage. So this is all again a projection. The biggest wart on Ayomanor's profile was his 8.7% drop rate in each of his 2 college seasons. Given some of the circus catches he made, most likely a reason for his drops was a lack of concentration. Now, considering the aforementioned issues, it may be too much to ask him to become a rock-solid starter as a rookie. With that said, it is obvious he is made of the right stuff and willing to work. It should not come as a shock to anyone if he is a year 2 breakout and carves out a long career as a solid complementary receiver. I really liked my high-end comp for him. Pierre Garçon.
Oh.
I don't know who else he's being comped to, but I really once I thought about that, I really liked it. Low end comp, Michael Wilson of the Cardinals. And for the best team fits, I think he's more Garçon than Wilson, by the way. Best team fits in order: Chargers, Patriots, Cowboys, Texans, Jaguars, Raiders, Jets again, and the Seahawks. And I gave him a 39 on the prospect grade, and that's tied for 30th out of 47 receivers over the last 4 years.
You know, he's another prospect, Doug, who has vastly different opinions out there in the big draft world that we live in. But mostly I heard about his hands and the fact that sometimes he does the clap attack to catch. You know, Is that his fatal flaw? Do you think he's going to be able to overcome that?
It's hard to teach. It's hard to teach out, or it's hard to correct certain behaviors. But that is the job of position coaches. I believe it was you were talking about Matt Waldman earlier, and I believe one of the reasons I was initially down on Courtland Sutton when he was a prospect years ago was because he had the same problem. We know now that Courtland Sutton's corrected that, at least to a large degree. So it's a thing that can be corrected, but it's just one of the several reasons that I would say that he's probably going to need. Let him mature. Mature is not the word I want. Let him marinate for a year, and I think you're going to get him in year 2. I think he'll just, again, like Garçon started off slowly out of Mount Union, and in year 2 he became the beginning of what he was. And I think that's another reason why I like the comp.
All right, sir. Let's keep the train a moving. Who do you have at wide receiver 9?
Iowa State's Jaylin Noel, 5'10", 194. Another small hand guy. Of course, you expect that at his size, 8 3/4 inch hands. And he's going to be 23 at the start of the season. He's got my hands. That's right.
Little tiny hands.
Okay. I said his hands were tiny. Nothing about his combine numbers were tiny. Actually, they were all either very small, very large, but in the very good direction.
Let that one go, buddy.
No, damn.
It's starting to get awkward.
Okay. Don't talk about another man's small hands. Okay.
Just keep moving, buddy. Keep moving.
All right. He nailed the combine. 4.39 in the 40. That's 85th percentile. 41.5-inch vertical. That's 96th percentile. Broad jump 11.2. When we're getting to 11.2, wow, that's 97th percentile. And his 20-yard shell, less meaningful ones, but still good. 4.17. The 20-yard shuttle, 6.82 in the 3-cone. If it wasn't
hot over here, buddy, those are the kind of numbers that get my blood pressure going up.
Let's just give him let's just make him the jet already, right?
Slow down, buddy.
No, okay.
I'll got to hear that to that, man. He might be a nice kid. I don't want to wreck him.
As you can probably tell from the combine numbers I just rattled off there, seemingly everything Noel does happens instantly. As I mentioned with the combine numbers, he mixes up his releases well and is very quick, which makes him hard to press. He's also the rare player who doesn't seem to lose any speed coming out of his breaks. He's very well built, despite sporting a smaller frame, and plenty tough, which likely contributes to his willingness to return kicks and punts as well as work over the middle. This is not a small guy that's afraid to work over the middle. While he's not a finished product as a route runner, it's scary to think what he might become if and when he gets there. He was especially good on deep targets, and that's 20 plus yards in 20. So he's especially good on deep targets in 2024. He had a 56% catch rate, and for 609 yards on those plays, and both of those numbers were top 5 in FBS among receivers who had at least 20 deep targets. Additionally, he ranked 3rd in FBS with 8 catches of 50 or more yards over the last 2 seasons. Perhaps the most disappointing aspect of Noel's profile was his run after catch ability. And why do I say that? Well, he was particularly good punt returner in 2024, and that held that job throughout his college career. That alone should translate to a player who makes things happen in space. But it didn't happen for him as a receiver. He's also well built. He's also built well enough to break a tackle or two, but even those dried up as his career progressed. He only forced 3 missed tackles last year. While he does significant damage after the catch, it is usually downfield and not on shorter routes. Regardless of a receiver's vertical explosiveness, and we talked about, 41.5-inch vertical, it's extremely rare for a smaller receiver to win on contested catches consistently, and that's also the case with Noel. Even though the NFL seems to be normalizing small and quicker receivers again, Noel will probably be limited to being a Z receiver who specializes in beating man coverage and moves inside in 11 personnel. That's 3 wide sets, much like Christian Kirk. Would not surprise me if Noel's career doesn't mirror Kirk's in some regard. And as you might imagine, my high-end comp for him, a more explosive Christian Kirk. And my low-end comp for him, Braxton Berrios. Yeah. My best team bets for him, in order, the Bears, the Titans, the Cardinals, Raiders, and Jets. And gave him a 38.5 on the prospect grade. That's tied for 35th out of 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
All right, sir. So one of your homes, Fantasy Points, their draft guide, they liken Noel to ARSB.
Mm-hmm.
Does he have that level of upside, in your opinion?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about because I caught I'll just say Brett Whitefield. I caught him. I must have been listening to a podcast short or something that popped up on my phone. I don't see that. I see it from a kind of a build perspective, and ARSB does a lot of his damage out of the slot too. I'll agree on those two, but that's one. Whitefield and I seem to be on the same wavelength as far as what we see, but I did not see that. No.
Fair enough. Thank you for your honest opinion. That's what we look for from Doug. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in to the Football Diehards show. Make sure you like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Unless you didn't like us, then don't tell a friend. Keep it quiet. But yes, Doug, we are moving right along. Now we're at the little questionable part of your rankings. Number 10.
Number 10. All right. Just want to make sure we're on the same number there.
Number 10.
10. Yes, we are. We are. It's funny to me because this draft has carbon copies, or at least reasonable facsimiles thereof. So you'll have one guy here, and then he's got his reasonable facsimile either right below him or a couple spots below him. And I think I got to tell you, I liked Kyle Williams out of Washington State. I like Kyle Williams' film a little bit better than I did Jaylin Noel. I think he'll get used a little bit differently in the NFL, which is why he's slightly lower than Noel. Anyway, I said he's from Washington State, 5'11", 190, 8 3/4 inch hands, and he's going to be 22 at the start of the season. Didn't test out near as athletically as Noel did, but here we go. 4'4" in the 40, 85th percentile. Had a vertical of 36.5. That's 62nd percentile. And then he had 9'11" in the broad. You remember Noel had 11.2, so 35th percentile there for Kyle Williams. Okay, so I just got done slamming him, right? In a few words, Williams is dynamic with the ball in his hands. He averaged 8.1 yards after the catch on short passes in 2024, which was a top 5 mark in the country. Okay, and now you're going to love this one. And I still think PFF got this wrong because it seems too out of this world. Among pass catchers with at least 11 targets behind the line of scrimmage, Williams averaged an ungodly FBS best 16.2 yards after the catch. Let me just repeat that for you. At least 11 targets behind and I think that's where he was. He might have been higher than that. But anyway, of all his targets behind the line of scrimmage, so think like Debo. The kind of stuff that Debo gets targeted on a lot. Is he going for 16.2 yards after the catch? That means the guy is amazing in space. Williams was credited with 21 missed tackles forced as well. Now, I think his next coach is going to look at those numbers and think he's nothing more than a scheme touch receiver. I hope that's not the case because he was also very good as a vertical threat. What do I mean? Among receivers with at least 15 deep targets, and again, those are 20-yard targets, he was 8th in FBS in catch rate, 58.3%, and tied for 5th with 6 touchdowns on 14 such catches. While his 4.4 time speed may sound average for a smallish receiver, defenders rarely closed the gap on him once he ran by him. So there's some guys run better with pads. Some guys run faster with pads. Other guys don't run as fast. He seems to be one of the guys that runs faster with his pads on. He proved he could produce consistently as a perimeter receiver too. And that's why I thought about putting him ahead of Noel. But anyway, not only did he line up outside 74% of the time in 2024, but he also went 10 for 16 in uncontested catch opportunities. Again, this is what a 5'11" guy. This is a small guy that's going 10 for 16 uncontested catches. That's probably not how he's going to win at the next level, but it's nice to know he has that in his bag. On the negative side, he's not quite as sudden as one might expect for a player with his frame. And I keep referring to Jaylin Noel. That's the primary reason why he falls behind Jaylin Noel. He's not quite as sudden, and I think he might end up getting pigeonholed too, as I kind of alluded to earlier. Williams' footwork needs to improve, so his routes need polish. Much like Noel, Williams' size might limit his ability to play on every down too. He wasn't challenged physically during his route very often, but his lack of play strength did show up occasionally at the catch point. We talked about his hand size being 8 3/4. That's not ideal either, although it should be noted drops were never much of an issue at Washington State. In my eyes, Williams profiles as a receiver that could and probably should be used in the same way Marvin Mims was at the end of last season for the Broncos, but with a little bit more time in the slot. His Williams' run after catch skills are too good not to get him involved on scheme touches, and he's too dynamic down the field to not use as a field stretcher. My high-end comp for him was Emmanuel Sanders. My low-end comp for him was Tyler Scott, the Chicago Bears' very own Tyler Scott, who we won't get into, but his best team fits in order for me: the Titans, and I'll get into that in a second. Titans, the Bears, the Cardinals, and the Raiders. And I think he might be a great fit for the Titans because if the Titans go Cam Ward at number 1 like we expect him to, Kyle Williams used to play with him at Washington State, so that might be a former teammates hooking up there. Gave him a 38.5 on the prospect grade, and that's tied for 35th out of 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
All right, Doug. So DLF has Kyle Williams ranked 17th, Football Guys 27th, Fantasy Points 18th. You and PFF both have him right around 9 and 10. What are you seeing that they're not?
Well, let's say for the hell of it that Williams during my summation of him. Okay, so where do most of these sites have Jaylin Noel at? Top 5, top 7? Athletically, he's a slightly lesser version of Jaylin Noel, who has proven that he can do more downfield and that he can do more as a perimeter receiver. If you told me that Noel's going to have a good career and Williams isn't, I'm going to say it must have been landing spot, because there's enough similarities between the two that you can convince me Noel's better. Obviously, you don't have to because I have him higher, but you can convince me that Noel's better, but he's not so much better. We're not talking. There's not 20 spots of difference between the two of them, and we saw, whereas Noel somewhat had Jayden Higgins to play off of, Williams was his own show in Washington State. So I would take that into consideration as well. I might have him a little bit too high, but I don't think I have him obsessively high. I'd be willing to bet I'm more right at having him at 10 than whoever had him at 27. He's the top 15 receiver in this class. I'm sure of that.
I love your confidence. That's why I love you, Doug. All right. Who do you have at number 11? Oh, I'm sorry, 12.
No, it's 11.
Oh, it is 11. Yeah, go ahead.
I was talking earlier about the carbon copies or reasonable facsimiles thereof. Okay, we got 2 more coming up. And this guy and then the next guy we'll talk about. Utah State's Jalen Royals. 6 foot 205, 9.5-inch hands. Would be 22 at the start of the season. He ran a 4.42 in the 40, and that's 81st percentile, and he had a 36-inch vertical at his pro day, I believe. I believe that's what I found in my research of him. So perhaps the best trait Royals brings to his new team is his run after catch ability. Despite missing nearly half of last season, his 17 missed tackles force was tied for 25th in FBS. Again, think about that. 17 missed half the season. If you carried that over for a full season, he would have been over 30, and I think he would have been number 1. So we're talking about a guy who could break tackles like it's nobody's business. He also had a 1.49 10-yard split in the 40. That's exceptional, and that's the best at his position in the draft class. So not only is he explosive, but he's also built as well as any receiver we will be discussing tonight. Combination of power and explosiveness make it easy to understand why he's lethal when the defense tries to press him or once he gets the ball in open space. To that end, his 7.9 yards after catch per reception ranked 5th in the country among receivers with at least 80 targets last year. He was money in contested catch situations in 2023. I don't know I've seen this in a while either. He was 17 of 23 in contested catch situations in 2023. That changed quite a bit in 2024, and I have some thoughts on maybe why that happened, but that's impressive regardless of the level of competition. As a likely eventual number 2 receiver in a pro offense, meaning less defensive attention and with a better quarterback, I'd be willing to bet Royals will end up being pretty good in contested catch situations again in the NFL. Royals is yet another receiver in this draft class, though, whose pro readiness was hindered by his play calling and the limitations of his quarterback. How can I say that? Royals was targeted 81 times in the 7 games he played. Okay, here we go with the boring stuff in the route breakdown here. Screens accounted for 23.4% of his targets. Screens, while hitch routes accounted for 22.2%, and in routes accounted for 12.3%. In short, the 3 aforementioned routes make up 58% of his route running portfolio in 2024. Think about how much easier that makes a guy to guard when 3 out of every 5 routes you know are going to be one of 3 things, and none of those were long routes, right? So all of them are going to be probably 10 to 12 yards. When you know you're going to be guarding a guy and he's not going to go any further than 12 yards down the field, makes him easier to guard. As one might imagine, for a receiver who ran so many routes that did not require a ton of nuance, Royals route running is average at best and somewhat unknown at worst. Much like Tre Harris at Ole Miss, Royals typically lined up a couple yards away from the sideline and was given a huge area just to get open. It is incredibly difficult to evaluate receivers who line up in a way they won't in the pros and are not allowed to run many routes, which is the primary reason Royals finds himself this low in my rankings. He doesn't threaten defenders vertically much either, so he could be limited to mostly short and intermediate usage in the NFL. He's another one of those guys. It would not be shocking if he needs a couple years to develop into a well-rounded receiver. We've already talked about why. But the power and run after catch ability should be enough to get the teams excited about him as an eventual high-end complementary receiver. My high-end comp for him, Juwan Jennings. My low-end comp for him was Jermaine Kearse. You might remember him from a few years ago. Best team fits, and these are going to be some familiar teams again in order: Chargers, Raiders, Jaguars, Seahawks, Texans, and Cowboys. Gave him a 38.5 prospect grade, and that's tied for 35th out on the 47 graded receivers over the last 4 years.
All right. Who is number 12?
Well, I just mentioned him here a couple seconds ago. Ole Miss's Tre Harris, similarly built, 6'2", 205, 9 5/8 inch hands. He's going to be 23 at the start of the season. A little bit worse athletically than the guy we just assessed, Royals, 4.54 in the 40. That's 35th percentile. 38.5 inch vertical, 82nd percentile. And at 10.5 broad, that's 74th percentile. As I alluded to a bit ago with Royals, teams are already in the projection business when it comes to drafting players. Figuring out what Harris can be at the next level takes that to an extreme. PFF charted Harris with 28 targets on hitch routes and 11 on screens, accounting for just over half of his targets for the 2024 season. The only other route he was targeted on more than 5 times was the post route. 28, 11, and everything else was 5 or smaller, JJ. Okay. We already talked about hitches and routes really do nothing to tell us about what a receiver can and can't be. So quite honestly, the bulk of evaluators' opinions on Harris will likely be based on the 8 post targets because, as I mentioned, hitch routes, especially against off coverage, and screens tell us little about a receiver. Harris did turn those 8 post targets into 5 catches for 227 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I'm going to give him the deceptively fast tag because he was so successful at getting behind corners, even during SEC play, which speaks to how well he sells his routes and the fact that he's a long strider. As someone who goes to 6'2", 205 and was used to so often on screens, he can do some work after the catch. So he's, again, we talked about carbon copy with Royals. All that reads very similarly to Royals. It is likely obvious at this point that Harris's shortcomings may be as much what he was not asked to do as much as what his actual weaknesses are. PFF credited him going 8 for 13 on contested catches in 2024, but how much of that can be chalked up to small sample size? His catches in those situations were good, but not exactly great. He's not an explosive athlete, nor does he create much separation. As I noted earlier, It's hard to say if he is a capable route runner because 3 routes counted for roughly 60% of his routes, and one of those 3 routes was a screen. We're not going to, again, we're just not going to know much about that. He has one primary release against press coverage, which is another thing that he'll have to change in the NFL. Some of these better receivers will have 3 or 4 different releases. We talked here last, I think 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Jackson Dart. Lane Kiffin's offense doesn't prepare guys for the NFL very well, and I think this is a prime example. Harris is also inconsistent as a blocker, and he also missed 6 games over the last 2 years due to injury. Given all that, it would be shocking if he is an impact player right away, because there's just so much he would have to be confident at that he hasn't been asked to do yet. Despite his success in 2024, Harris strikes me as more of a possession receiver who might eventually emerge as a team's top red zone option. And for my comps, high end, a less physical Juwan Jennings, and low end, Gabe Davis. My best team fits: Raiders, Cowboys, Titans, and Giants. And he gets a 37.5 on the prospect grade, and that's tied for 41st out of the 47 receivers out of the last 4 years.
All right, sir. Who is the final receiver of the night at number 13?
This one's tough. This one's tough to put down here because he's fun to watch, and I think in the right system he could easily be top 8. But we're talking about Texas's Isaiah Bond. 5'11", 180, 8.5-inch hands. What he does have going for him, he's 21. He'll be 21 for the start of the NFL season. He's the guy that thought he was going to break Xavier Worthy's 40-time record. He ended up going 4.39, which is not a bad time by any stretch of imagination, but that's 85th percentile for a smaller receiver, so not what we were looking for. So what do I think about him? Much like Jalen Waddle and Jameson Williams before him in Alabama, Bond can change the way a defense plays by himself with his raw speed. Again, he's one of those guys, I think he runs faster on the field than he does on the track. But anyhow, also like Waddle and Jameson Williams, he also has the flexibility and loose hips to break off his route more quickly than any cornerback could hope to counter. He doesn't break off his routes quite as often or violently as Jerry Jeudy, but he could probably do that if he wanted to or needed to. Unlike Jameson Williams, Bond surprisingly does not mind getting a little bit physical after the catch and running routes over the middle. His acceleration is as good as anyone in this draft class and may scare some teams from pressing him because he probably won't get caught from behind if he beats the initial jam. Unfortunately, and the reason he finds himself down here, he appears to be one of those production versus traits prospect that comes out, if not one, more like 10 prospects that fit that description come out in every draft. He topped 100 yards in a game only once in his career and never posted more than 668 receiving yards in a season, despite predominantly playing with 2 quarterbacks who are likely to be drafted no later than the 2nd round this year. That's Jalen Noel and Quinn Ewers. He tracks the ball well, but is not a player who's overly effective in contested catch situations. To that end, he 6 for 19. He was 6 for 19 over his career in contested catches. He was good. I believe in 2023 he was pretty good on deep targets, but he was horrible the other 2 years on deep targets. So it's possible that his quarterbacks were more to blame for that than he was. We talked about how inaccurate Milroe can be, and we both, I don't think, like Quinn Ewers. So despite the fact that they might go at a decent spot in the draft, I think we can say average at best quarterback play might have hurt him there. Nevertheless, he seems uncertain at best, catching the ball with his hands consistently, despite evidence to the contrary. He was the guy that Alabama fell behind big time in the Iron Bowl a couple years ago, and he's the one that made the catch in the back of the end zone that brought Alabama back. It was like a 30 or 40-yard catch as time expired in the back of the end zone. He caught that with his hands, no problem. He can catch with his hands, but he doesn't seem to trust him as much as he should. As one might expect for someone his size, I believe what I say, 5'10", 180, he won't break many tackles, and he can be taken out of play by a good press corner, which he will see a lot more often in the NFL. It is that last part that could make him more of a package player early in his career unless his new team has a clear X receiver, which will free Bond to play off the line of scrimmage more often. Bond has a chance to be a dangerous NFL receiver if his play caller is smart enough to keep him on the move so he doesn't face physical coverage nearly as often. But the list of teams that have one of those kind of coordinators who will also overlook Bond's lack of contributions as a blocker is a short list. And so my comps probably won't surprise you then. A couple of Alabama receivers, high-end comp, Jalen Waddle, low-end comp, John Mechie. And I think he needs a team like the Dolphins. I think he needs to land on a team like the Dolphins. And if Tyreek Hill gets traded, maybe that's how it happens. But in order for team fits, Dolphins, Raiders, Panthers, Seahawks, and Bears. And he also gets the 37.5 prospect grade, which again was tied for 41st out of 47 graded receivers.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug. 13 receivers. Lots for me to review and think about. But it is time for us to say goodbye. Let people know where they can find us. Any final thoughts you might have? Doug, you're up first.
I went pretty long, so I've teased my FFF Today profiles that are coming up. Tet McMillan will be the one that's either already up, the most recent to come up, or will be coming up shortly. I will get through, I think, 17. I think I'll go through 17 prospects on the site, and then I'll probably have the best of the rest, which we'll talk about most of these guys that we're covering during this pod, or during these pods, these four pods here. And so that do it for me. Otherwise, JJ, take us home.
I'm at JJ Wenner on the socials. You can follow the pod at FF Diehards on X. Thank you for listening. We are doing kickers next week, Sean. Thank you so much for asking. Please like and subscribe. Please make sure you're following Doug, reading his profiles on FF Today. Make sure to follow Full-Time Fantasy on X. Stay tuned for exciting updates about the FFWC. And we will be back next Wednesday at 7. Doug, why are you pointing?
I'm pointing. Go ahead and finish. I'll get to it before we wrap up here.
Well, go ahead.
Hey, Sean wanted us to do kickers. Ryan Fitzgerald. Florida State's Ryan Fitzgerald is the best kicker, supposedly best kicker prospect. Go take that to the bank.
All right, we don't talk about kickers on this show, so Doug is now off for the rest of the show. Oh, no, everything's going bad now. What did you do? Oh, this is all going wrong. See what happens?
Kicker episode. Wow. Okay.
Oh, had to put him back on. Anyway, we're going to be back next Wednesday at 7 p.m. to cover rookie tight ends, kickers, punters, and more. Until then, be safe, be well, and as always, boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.